Hello everybody, welcome back to X-Plane 11. It's been a while, I know, but I hope that you will enjoy this tutorial. Today we're going to be covering ILS, which stands for the Instrument Landing System, which is a precision runway approach aid that uses two radio beams, which together provide both vertical and horizontal guidance during approach. Now what that means is basically airports that have runways equipped with ILS have two radio beams shooting out radio waves to direct aircraft, which take those radio waves using their instrument system and directs that aircraft on a approach into that airport on that specific runway. Now, I'll be flying to Seattle Tacoma International. I'll be landing on runway 34 right, which has an ILS frequency of 110.3. To find the ILS or localizer frequency, there's a couple different places you might be able to find it. What I'm showing you here is an ILS runway diagram. Now, you can find this at multiple different places. I recommend using SkyVector, awesome free program, just at skyvector.com. So I recommend using that. So with this chart, you can find the VOR localizer, or DME, as well as the ILS localizer frequency, which is all one and the same. It's just depending on what system you're using. So that frequency, as you can see, is 110.3. Now I'm going to be using that to bring in myself to runway 34 right, which you see here. Now, couple important things you want to notice here. You'll notice that there is a glide slope point of intersection. This basically means at this altitude, you will intersect with the glide slope. That's important for ILS, as your glide slope is your vertical guidance. Now, way before you hit your vertical guidance, you will hit your horizontal guidance. That's your left and right. So, now that you kind of understand how the system kind of works and how you can find that frequency, let's get into the actual aircraft systems here. This is the Skylab Cessna 172. It looks a little bit different than your default X-Plane 11 Cessna 172. However, the systems interact exactly the same, and how you can actually input the information into the system is very, very similar. Now, I'm currently using Autopilot to bring me up to 3,000 feet, using my heading bug at 50 to bring me, to bring me close to the airport itself. Now, I'm going to pop up the GPS here. The reason I'm popping up the GPS is because the Garmin system here, which is the Garmin 430, this is where you're going to input your ILS frequency. Now, on the default, it might be slightly different, but it's going to be very similar to this system. So to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to hit the push C/V. That's going to change your selector from comms, which is your radios, to VLOC. Now, VLOC stands for VOR localizer. That you use this basically on ILS and also VOR. So now that we are here, what you're going to do is you're going to input your ILS frequency. Do that, you're going to use the knobs, and you're going to put in the frequency. Now, again, we are using 110.30. Now that we have that selected, there's one more step you need to complete. Hit the little V, which has its arrows pointing up and down. This changes which navigation you're using. We need to use the 110.30, not 117.30. So to change it, you hit this button, and it's going to select now. Went from your whatever's highlighted, basically, that's your standby. So your standby now is active. So my active ILS frequency is 110.30. Now that that's been done, you're pretty much done with this panel here. So you can go ahead and select that away. Now you'll notice that on your nav 1, which is this right here, or your VOR ILS 1, it's not picking up any frequency. And that's because at this point I'm too far away from the airport to detect the actual frequency of the radio system. If I were to show you how far away I am, sorry, wrong way, that's Seattle. So I'm probably about 20 nautical miles away, maybe a little bit further. Most places you're going to be able to pick them up about 12 nautical miles away. Some can go up to 20, 25, but most are going to be relatively close to the airport. So it's important to realize that you may not detect it until you're, closer to the airport. Now you notice that as I was talking, that something changed here. Now what changed was basically now it's detecting well, it looks like maybe it's detecting. No, it's still not detecting it. Kind of is. That's weird. I don't know why it specifically did that, but that's okay. As we get closer to the airport, it's going to lock onto the ILS. Now, I just hit here as nav1. Basically, this is going to give me a tone. It's going to be a series of beeps that are going to give me, let me know that basically I have reached the ILS frequency range. So until then, I will go ahead and speed this up, and I'll see you as we get closer and get the ILS localizer. Alright folks, so you notice that the nav1 or VOR ILS1 has now shifted, showing nav2, and you hear that? Beeps. Listen. Now that is a particular identifier, and if you look on the chart, it actually shows you what it's going to be. That lets you know that you have the right ILS frequency selected. But yeah, so we're heading to the airport right now. It's saying nav2, and you'll notice that the lines here have now shifted, showing you this will be your horizontal line, so it's going to swing left and right. This is going to be your vertical line, so it's going to swing up and down. We're going to use those to guide ourselves into the approach. Your objective is to have them cross each other in a perfect plus sign, basically across right here in the center on these dotted lines. You're going to, if the line is to the right, you're going to turn to the right to intercept that line. If it's to the left, you're going to turn to the left to intercept that line. If the glide slope or the vertical is above or below the line, you're going to push your aircraft down if it's below, pull up if it's above, which you'll see that in action as we get closer to the airport and they start flying the ILS approach. Now I'm getting a low fuel indicator because my fuel is, well, it's low. So let me go ahead and fix that before we have any issues, which I believe, yeah, I would still have plenty of time, but just to get that indicator away. But I still had plenty of fuel. I had 45 minutes of fuel, so I still could have easily made it to Seattle. Yeah, so it wouldn't have been a problem. But just to get that annoying little low fuel indicator out of the way. So, like I was saying, as I get closer, I'm going to actually turn my aircraft to initiate that ILS approach. Now, I'm currently at 3,000 feet. And if you notice on the diagram for your ILS, 434 right, to intercept the glide slope, I need to be at 2,200 feet. So I need to go ahead and descend. Now I'm going to use my autopilot here. You could do this manually, of course. This is just to basically make it smooth so I can keep talking and not have to worry about anything. So I'm going to go ahead and descend 500 feet per minute. We're going to go for 2,200. And you can hear that tone still coming through here. And like I said, on the actual diagram, you'll see the actual quote-unquote Morse code for Seattle's ILS approach. And if you'll listen very carefully, you will see, or hear, I should say, that actual frequency. So the localizer should be 110.3. Hear that? The exact dots and dashes of that identifier you hear over the radio. And that's to make sure, again, you're not flying to the wrong place. You're not flying to a VOR. You're not flying into an ILS for the wrong runway. That is another backup system to verify you are on the correct frequency for the runway you're trying to fly into. Pretty neat, I would say, that you can actually identify that over just hearing the radio beeps and dashes. Pretty neat there. So I noticed a mistake on my autopilot. It was descending just using vertical speed. My altitude was not armed. So I corrected that, and we're going to head back up to where I'm supposed to be. So that's what I get for not paying attention during that portion. Always pay attention, guys. Always pay attention. Oh, man. And before anyone starts yelling in the comments like, you don't know what you're doing, you're whatever. I get it. Okay, listen. I'm just here to show you ILS. I'm not really paying attention to everything else that's going on the aircraft. So bear with me in regards to actually flying the aircraft in other fashions. I know I'm not following all the procedures and everything, but anyway. So actually, we need to go ahead and start making our turn here. I'm going to turn off heading. Turn off the autopilot altogether, actually. And we're going to start making our turn here. We're still going to continue to climb. And I'm going to fly this all manually. We're going to go ahead and start making our turn here. Still climbing up a little bit because we're too low. And that's all turning. As you can see, I'm trying to line up with this line right here. This is going to bring me into the airport, and specifically the runway, which is 3-4 right. If I'm not mistaken, that's the airport right there. Actually, nope, there it is right there. Yep, that's the runway right there. 3-4 right. Right there. So, like I said, our goal is to keep these two lines centered on these dotted lines in a cross, basically, a plus sign there. That is our objective. And if we do that, then we will actually have a really good approach here into Seattle or whatever airports you're flying into. Basically, ILS it's really not hard. It's really simple. It's just you have to understand the aircraft that you're flying at the time. You have to understand how to input the ILS frequency, what the ILS frequency is, and how that is going to show up on your instruments. For example, a glass cockpit, a G1000, or a 737, A320, all of those are going to show up slightly different in the ILS is going to show up slightly different on those instruments. So knowing your aircraft is paramount to actually flying the aircraft, duh, right? But specifically with ILS, you have to know how it's going to interact with your systems. So in a Cessna or most general aviation, having a nav indicator, a nav instrument, or a VOR ILS instrument, as some call it, it is pretty the same. I mean, it's pretty much the same across the board. But when you start getting into the glass cockpits, the G1000, or start getting into some of the other larger airliners and things like that, you're going to have some differences. So just keep that in mind as you're flying, that you're... notice that the glide slope just got hit. So I actually got a drop. I need to get down some a little high. So just know your aircraft and how it interacts. And if you have any questions about how it's going to show up on a particular aircraft, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer that question for you. So I'm high right now. I'm pretty much dead on the money when it comes to my horizontal, so back and forth, left and right. But I'm high right now on the glide slope, so I'm trying to bring my aircraft down without speeding up too much. And all I'm doing again is I'm focusing here on this instrument. The point of ILS is not to fly, not to use it during days like today, which is a pretty nice day. I mean, I can fly VFR no problem today. It's mainly when I'm flying in conditions that wouldn't necessarily permit me to see the runway until I'm 1,000, maybe 500 feet above the runway, and that all depends on the minimums, of course. But just know that in general, in a general aviation aircraft, you're not going to use ILS for your normal approaches. But if you're in a airliner or some other non-general aviation commercial aircraft, and a lot of times you actually use ILS just as a basically to make sure you're coming in correctly, and you don't have to worry about messing up your approach too much as you're coming in. But you're more than welcome to use it. It's just normally you just use VFR coming in, and not necessarily use ILS. But you can. There's nothing against it. You can use ILS if you want. But in most cases, I would just use my visuals, my eyeballs. These my eyeballs flying. So now I'm a little bit below, so I'm going to give myself a little bit more power. I'm just going to fly this approach all the way in. So again, ILS is not hard. It's not a hard system to understand or even master in many regards. It's just you have to know how to input the information into your aircraft, your ILS frequency, and then how it's going to interact with your aircraft, such as how it's going to show up on your instruments. The flaps down 1. Just bringing myself down. I'm pretty high off the glide slope. Cut that throttle a little bit so I can nose down a little bit more. Catch up. There we go. See that horizontal line, vertical line, I should say, coming up to meet. And again, I'm not even looking outside the windshield right now. I am purely just focusing on my instruments here. Now, one of the things to note here is that as you get closer to the runway itself, you're actually getting closer to the transmitter, the radio transmitter of the ILS. And as you get closer, the margin of error gets smaller. So it actually gets way more sensitive the closer you get. And that makes sense when you're thinking about it. 100 miles away, moving 1,000 feet up and down is not going to really change your degree angle from that system. But if you're 10 feet away, changing 1,000 feet is going to dramatically change that direction, the angle. So as you get closer, that's going to change how sensitive that system is. So keep that in mind. That as you get closer, you're going to be fighting a little bit more with your aircraft to maintain that perfect cross section there. And eventually you'll lose your ILS as you get right there on top of it, and you basically have to fly in visually, which is why there are certain minimums you have to meet in IFR conditions, and that's to make sure you're not gonna screw up too bad. If you can't see the runway at all and you're 20 feet above it, there's some problems. So again, just focusing on the instrument right there and trying to keep my aircraft as close to perfect on it as possible, which can be difficult. Again, the closer you get, more sensitive it is. A little bit to the right, it looks like. Bring it in. There we go. So now I'm going to break away from the instrument and look at my runway. Well, that's a pretty good approach. Obviously, I'm a little low, and I can see that. So we're just going to bring it in now using the runway. Looking down the runway, looking down the runway. As I get close, down the runway, and transition to straight and level flight. That's going to bring me down nice and gently. And there we go. Cut throttle. So guys, that's how you fly an ILS approach. Hope that made sense to y'all. I wasn't just jabbering around and you're losing interest going, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But hopefully that helped, and hopefully that fulfilled all your hopes and dreams when it comes to ILS approaches. If you'd like to see how to do it using Autopilot, let me know in the comments below, as well as if you'd like to see any particular aircraft in regards to ILS approaches, or if you have questions about how the ILS approach is going to show up on your instrument panel, depending on your aircraft, let me know in the comments below, of course. Like, subscribe, hit that bell notification so you know when I upload new videos, and I appreciate every single one of you. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time up in the sky.